heard it was the one day that somebody closed it. The caretaker was gone away and said, I'm not going to open that because I won't be back. Outside for it. And there are a few Madden headstones here that we look at as well. They're not here the ones, but they're still Madden. They're over that corner. So they have one specific place. We're very quite close to the chancel area of the church. It's his Church of Ireland now. Yeah, it was Catholic. The pre-emancipation is Catholic. So any Catholic area here. And there are a few headstones here as well. Madden headstones that we look at. Just a few. Enough to touch base with Maddens. We don't have a big strong history of the Maddens here involved with the cathedral itself. They are canons. The chapter of canons that would have been associated with it. They're members of the canons of Clonfert. In other words, they would have been involved in various parishes and that outside, but they would have sat on a chapter here as well. There were Maddens there was definitely the Kellys more or less held sway, I suppose, over the church in this region. There was a lot of Kellys, bishops and that of Clonfert, so they were very powerful. But anyway, I want to make a start.
There we go.
Yeah.
I bet you missed the most important one. It's a one on the side with a little lever. Oh no, there's a switch down at the bottom. A white switch. That has to go to number 1 or 2. Away from off. It's either 1 or 2. I change his mind every so often. Okay, you're in Clonfert. You're in the parish of Clonfert, but you're also in the townland of Clonfert. Townland is the smallest unit that you're going to get in Ireland. And it's usually, the parish usually takes its name from the townland within which the primary church is. You're at what we call the Cathedral of Clonfert. So this church here that goes right back to the medieval period is actually, the first mention we get of this church here in Clonfert is 1045, and it was burned by the Imania. We've blamed on the O'Kellys, not the Maddens. But the O'Kellys burned the church here in 1045. So that gives us an opportunity to suggest that it's as early as the 10th century. And when we see churches like this, plain churches with these projections on them, they are the sort of church that starts to evolve in the 10th century. The cathedral in Clonfert has these antae, they call them, on them. And it's a typical ground plan. Two more on the east end, we're at the west now at the moment. So that simple church stood here through time and was embellished over that time. So in 1111, when Clonfert was elevated to diocesan status, it was that simple building. Whereas in Europe and elsewhere, they were building majestic cathedrals. In Ireland, we didn't do that. There's no need to. We weren't overly excited by all of this architecture and that. We had a different way of thinking, completely. But by 1180 or thereabouts, this wonderful Romanesque story was applied here to the West End. What I didn't do, and I'm going to go back to it because I should have, I was sort of trying to draw people in. First of all, Clonfert itself is a very ancient place. Clonfert is an Arden Age space. There was worship taking place here, there was settlement taking place here in the Arden Age. If you read the Odenchanicus, which is the lore of places, it's all about places going back, stuff that was written down in the medieval period but was actually transmitted orally from prehistory.
What's the Arden Age?
The Arden Age in Ireland would be, well, Christianity starts in the 5th century. So the Arden Age are the 4 or 5 centuries prior to that, and maybe even 6 or 7 centuries. It's a prehistoric age. It's the age before writing. So it's prehistoric. In other words, we haven't histories, we can't write them. But from the early Christian period, from the 5th century on, then we're moved into what we call the medieval period. So you have the Iron Age, you have the Bronze Age behind that, or before that, and then you have what we call the Neolithic, going right back to when people first settled in Ireland about 12,500 years ago. Now, in the past we've been saying 10,000, 9,000 years ago, we have evidence for earlier settlement. Due to a lady looking at a bear's kneecap. A bear's kneecap can tell you an awful lot if there's knife marks on it. So about 12,500 years ago, somebody butchered a bear down in the cave in County Clare. And this was lying in the museum for 75 years until a very astute young doctor, lecturer up in Sligo, actually examined it for the first time, and she saw it was butchered. So it changes all our understanding. So everything we learned, everything's in our textbooks, changed in the last 2 years, due to a lady called Marion Dow, Dr. Marion Dow. So we can now talk about a Paleolithic, an old Stone Age in Ireland. We didn't think we had. We thought we started in what we call the Middle Stone Age, the Mesolithic. But anyway, back to here. During the Iron Age, we know that the lands were cleared here, the forests were cleared, because we have evidence of cereal grown here from about 200 AD, there or thereabouts, which is a contradiction, because we always thought that didn't happen until about the 6th century, when when the Christian church had established itself. We also have this reference from the Denchanicus of the Druid Doring. There was a man here, a Druid called Doring, and he foretells that a man called Brendan is going to come and make this place holy. But Doring was here looking after a sacred grove of rowan trees in Clonfert. So the Fina, if you like, or the Clan MacMorna, more so, that particular sept or clan, believed that they would enter heaven by being buried beneath the rowan trees of Clonfert. And before one famous battle, they all gathered here, they slept beneath the rowan trees here in Clonfert, and they ate the berries of the rowan tree. That's a very pagan sort of thing, to use the rowan tree as part of your worship and that. So Clonfert is a pre-Christian place. Clune can be meadow, or an insulated spot, or a bog island, and Ferta comes from the pre-Christian Ferta, the circular barrow burials of the pre-Christian period. So a Ferta, any place with the Ferta element in it, suggests pre-Christian burial. You should find the mounds and the humps and bumps in the landscape for that. I found one out the back here, had forgotten about it over life, but I found it when it was too late, when I had submitted my own work to the university, but that's neither here nor there. It is there, and I know it's there, and it's the physical evidence that sort of supports everything else that we argue about. But Brendan came here, and we're told, founded a monastery here in 557. St. Brendan. Brendan the Navigator. Those that are here from America would have heard the tradition. Certainly anybody of Irish extract would probably have heard the traditions that St. Brendan discovered America. Well, certainly St. Brendan went on wonderful voyages. The Navigatio Sancte Brendane, this wonderful 8th, 9th century text, Latin text, translated into every other language after that, talks about Brendan's voyage, and that he sails out into the western seas, and that he discovers the Isles of the Blessed, and all of this. But whether he got to America or not will never be proven. Tim Severin, it was 1976, Tim Severin went on his voyage, and he proved that he got to Newfoundland with a skin boat. So he proved that's possible. The Vikings reputedly got to America way back as well. Well, you know, it had to be the 8th, 9th century for them. And but the important thing is that Brendan founded Clonfert, and that he's buried in Clonfert. We're told in his life, in the Vita of Brendan, that an angel decreed that his resurrection was to be from Clonfert. And if his resurrection is to be from Clonfert, he must undoubtedly be buried here. So we believe in the Vita, even though it was written by Hagriar, which was probably 5 or 6 centuries later, who wants it from here because he's an important personage. But how we know he's buried here, we have a stone marking he's buried. And if you don't believe me, come over here and I'll show you. I can prove it to you that Brendan's buried here. Absolutely, do you see it's on the stone? There's the proof. There's the proof. As a matter of fact, no. If you asked any child, if any of our children came in here, if we were doing our job right, they'd tell you that St. Brendan's cat jumped from the tower, he landed on top of the stone under which Brendan is buried, and he left these cat's paw marks. Now, that's the legend and the lore. That's a way of linking Brendan back to this site. We talked about propaganda earlier. This is a bit of Catholic counter-Reformation propaganda. Good late 17th century Catholicism trying to work its way back in here again, because this was, at that stage, Protestant or Church of Ireland church. And how you move back in again is you claim the burial place of the saints, or you claim the holy well associated with them. This is all what's happening in the 17th century. But anyway, as an archaeologist, we completely blow that out of the water. It's a load of rubbish in that sense. That slab dates to certainly no earlier than the 15th century, more likely late 16th or 17th century. Rain solution, because it's limestone and the acid in the air creates these little solution marks here, which turn out to be cat's paw indentations. Brendan died in the 6th century. The tower was built in the 15th century. So unless Brendan's cat could jump through time and space, this wasn't physically possible. But he's still going to resurrect from Clonfert. Now, it's more likely he's buried beneath the primary church. nearer to the east end where the altar was. So that makes more sense. So accept this for what it is. This is folk tradition keeping the life of Brendan alive. But Brendan is clearly in Clonfert. We're told that he died in Annadown, in the west of the county here, at his sister Regis Convent on the 16th of May in the year 577, if you accept that date. 580 something if you accept a different date. All these dates are very movable. But the principal thing is he died on the 16th of May at his sister Regis' house. And as he's dying on the chapel, as he dies on the threshold of her convent, he says, I'm fearful. And she says, what are you afraid of, basically? He says, I'm afraid to go before my Maker. He was afraid to go before God, that he'd be tested and, you know, they'd have to reconcile for all the sins that he probably hadn't done, but maybe we did. But the important thing there was that he requested that his body be taken back to Clonfert for burial. His movement between 60 mile away or 65 mile away took 3 days and 3 nights. So you can see where that's coming from. That's coming from the Bible, that's biblical stuff. But it's the same thing, it's the whole Easter thing being rolled out there. But it's important that he's buried here. It's important for the tribes that you have the premier saint establishing himself. They want him here. So your Maddens wanted him here. Whoever's writing down this wanted him here. Same as Joe Kelly's wanted him here. This is the primary site. It goes on to be, it's the premier saint goes on then to be the diocesan centre. So this is the centre of the Diocese of Clonfert. It's still the cathedral of the Church of Ireland diocese, the Protestant diocese. The Catholic cathedral is in Loughrea. That's 19th century, late 19th century cathedral. There was an earlier church there that functioned as a form of cathedral at an earlier stage. But a very important site. The church, as I say, is probably as early as the 10th century. It's what we call a dovlik. In other words, it's a dove as in donachar, that's for Sunday or for church, and lick, again going back to that word, a lack or a lick, a stone. So it's a stone church. And these were new on the Irish landscape. We were building our churches in wood, darchocks, oak churches. And we started to build them in stone, so we call them stone churches. And for any of you that know Duleek in County Louth, it's the English translation from Dovlik. It's a stone church. And it was so unusual to see a stone church that the place has ever since been known as Dovlik or Duleek. So, a bit of useless information. You might be asked to have a table quiz sometime. What's so important about a Dovlik or Duleek?
Where did you get the date of his death?
Oh, we made that up. I use 577 because if you establish it in 557, I can remember it. It's one of the dates that's given in various chronicles. Now, there's later dates given as well. The trouble is that we can't fix a date for him. Some people say that he was in his 90s when he went on the voyage to America. You know, so
stretching the imagination.
An extra of religions buried here.
yeah, but
Okay.
the majority, 90% of the burials here are Catholic burials. Any of them that are inside railings or the bigger tomb types are all Protestant burials.
Okay.
And there's a number of Protestant burials along here. But there hasn't been a Protestant burial here probably in 25 years or 30 years.
Okay.
Is it most Church of Ireland buildings do not have steeples?
This is a 15th century.
But I seem to notice like Temple Moor and a couple of
And most of
others.
them have what they call the Board of First Fruits towers, the ones with the pinnacles in the corners.
Oh, and but
Yeah.
usually a Catholic has a single steeple.
Yeah, well, that's you find that, yeah. But that's you're talking 19th century
So,
for that.
but I
That's later on, is it?
general average humanoid, you see a flat top Church of Ireland.
Yeah. You will. You will. You will, yeah. Most of them are towers.
Can you tell them about the miracle here 6 years ago?
Miracle.
When the tornado hit. and
Oh,
this-
we were
this
struck by a tornado here, and that's one thing that isn't in the annals because it only happened in our time. We were struck by a tornado, and thankfully the church survived. Anyway, what you're looking at here is the high point of Irish Romanesque. This is a Romanesque doorway. You could find this anywhere on the European continent. Not necessarily like this, but it's a very important doorway. And what you have to look at here, this is a huge shrine to the guy that's inside, to Brendan. If we painted this, if we took those heads in the arcades and then painted bodies beneath, what we're looking at is what are referred to as Limoges shrines, the sort of metal shrine that you get in France and places like that. We have these diminutive little shrines with copper heads, painted enamel bodies. Oh no, it's very tribal. The sandstone is falling apart, believe it or believe it not. But anyway, it's the high point of Irish Romanesque. In the 15th century, somebody decided we couldn't be going on with this old crooked doorway with this slanted doorway, trabeated doorway as they're known. So they straightened it up. And this here is a guy called Matthew McRae, who came in here as a bishop to straighten out the O Maddens and others that were usurping the Augustine Abbey down the road. There was mayhem taking place down here. There was guys with concubines. There was boys slaughtering each other. Half them were O Maddens. Some of them were McGagans. There was no Kellys down here. There were some Cormicans. The Cormicans held sway in the end. But McRae came in. He was an Augustinian himself. He became the Bishop of Clonfert, and he set out to straighten out what was going on. But if you read the papal letters, that book I showed some of you earlier by Patrick Lorton, go through that, and you'll just see how bad you were. I can assure you, you'll actually be delighted with the scandal that's in it, but it's all clerical scandals of the 15th and 16th century. And the majority of them in there that are usurping their powers are in Maddens. We'll let the moment just see how they behave when they have a good listen. Anyway, but that's fact. So the O Maddens were quite powerful within all the churches and within the monasteries here, but they were also quite irregular in their practice.
And had they anything to do with this church? The Maddens?
Not the church itself. They would have sat on the board of canons here. They would have been in the chapter of canons here, but there's no. We're not finding direct links. We can't say that they built it. Some scholars would say it was the O'Kellys built it, but there's absolutely no documentary evidence for who built it. None whatsoever. So it's speculation that the O'Kellys were great church builders, and that's taken as the hint that they built this. Certainly the Umania burnt it. The O'Kellys burnt it. We'd say that your tribe weren't part of that burning, but we think it was the O'Kellys. And again, that's a tussle for power. That's burning it in spite of somebody else that's probably holding it at that stage. It's not about the spine of what should we put aside? But we mentioned the O'Horns earlier, the people who inaugurated the O Maddens. The 17th century graveslab is for a guy called Roger O'Horn. He was the chieftain of his clan. That's what tells us there in Latin, maybe English, I can't remember now at this stage of my life. But the important thing here is it's dated to 1618 or 1616. But Roger O'Horn, chieftain of his clan. So these are the O'Horns, these are the people who had the right to inaugurate the O Maddens, if what we're told is correct. So that's very, very important. That's a link back again to last night. So you can see that they're one of the principal families. We see no slab here for the O Maddens, but what we're told is that the O Maddens had a private chapel here, a burial space here. And we're also told that the Samers of Ballymore acquired it. And the Samers of Ballymore, that's Larnestown. There was intermarriage between those families. They have a vault out here in the graveyard. So maybe the Madden chapel was there, but I'm inclined to think that this particular transept that's on the south side here that survives, I have a feeling that that has to be the O Madden chapel or the O Madden, but we have no documentary, no historical evidence whatsoever for it. But clearly those transepts or side wings, there was two, built onto the side of a parish church, don't serve as aisles because you can't see the altar. They're independent chapels. They're chapels for the burial of private families with their own altar. And if the O Maddens had the chapel here, if they had their own private burial space here in Clonfert, according to a lot of experts, well then it had to be, I would think, one of the transepts this year. And it's inclined to think that one because it has survived longer and things like that. And there is a nice late medieval grave slab in it as well, a high status grave slab. But anyway, 1616, the O'Horns, Roger O'Horn, chief of his nation, and Donald also mentioned the physicians to the O Maddens. There were also the physicians to the Earls of Ormond, to the Butlers of Ormond, and that's that over there. Can anybody remember who he said were the physician family, or the doctors of Higgins, was it? Canons. Richard and John Cannon, and it says it somewhere down there in Latin, physici, physicians. And for those of us that go to meeting on Tuesday night, or Monday night, I'm not around Tuesday night, Monday night, you will actually also encounter the Canons again, and also the O'Horns again. So they're in all of the important buildings around here. But that one is 1612. And you can see, it is, where's the one on the green? That's the position, that's the position. So you have Richard and John Cannon, and you have a date of 1612, that's it. And you have Mary Angel Cunningham, quite Catholic at that stage, and you have Maria. And you definitely won't be finding Mary on a Protestant headstone. Think about 1612, that was on the floor here. The Reformation is well and truly gone by at that stage. But it's still being used for Catholic burial. It wasn't until 1627 that a true Protestant bishop was appointed to Clonfert. He was the former Dean of County Down. Prior to that, the man who was in power here, and going back again to the Burkes, Donald Burke's ancestors, the man who was here when Henry VIII appointed his own bishop to Clonfert was a man called Roland Burke. He was Catholic, Protestant bishop, I think, of Clonfert, and Catholic bishop of Ellenfield, or maybe vice versa at that stage. Complicated stuff. When Henry put his own guy in here, a fellow called Richard Mangle, Burke wouldn't leave. He wouldn't give up Clonfert. He says, no, I'm not going. And because Henry VIII had just got the Clanrickards, the Burkes, to surrender their lands and have it re-granted them, given the title of the Earls of Clanrickard, they were so powerful. Henry said, hang on, I'm not going to upset the status quo. I just haven't settled. This guy in who's going to manage these Burkes and all of their other agencies in here. He decided to withdraw his own guy. He left Roland the Burke here in Clonfert. Roland was here prior to Henry, here during the Henrican period. He survived as Protestant bishop under Edward VI. He went back to Catholicism under Mary. He went back to Anglicanism or Protestantism under Elizabeth, and finally died during the occupancy, if you like, of Elizabeth on the throne of England and Ireland and all of the other Commonwealth countries. So you can see what went on there. He held the place right through all of us. So there was no Reformation. It was a soft Reformation. He was neither Catholic nor Protestant. He could be anything. He was a prince of the land as much as the church. He really wanted, he had the power. And after him we had a guy called, one tried to Galway. Anyway, it might come to me. But we had two tribal names from Galway. The second guy into the early 17th century was a guy called Roland Lynch. Lynch lived in Kilmacduagh, so we had no bishop here for a while at that stage. What's said about Lynch is that his wife, he was a recusant. His wife was Catholic and he was Protestant. There were half-papists in every sense. They weren't loyal to the crown. They weren't loyal to Anglicanism. They usurped lands and that sort of stuff. And the guy that was here before him was one of the Kerwins. And it was during Kerwin's stewardship here as bishop that the old bishop's palace that's down the back that we won't see was built. Queen Elizabeth had suggested that Clonfert become a university, that would become a university town. She wanted to build a university in Ireland to stop all the young Irishmen going to the continent and becoming good Catholics. If she could train them here in the centre of Ireland on the River Shannon, as was in the old English, she could make good Protestants of it. So she gave an order that the walls of Clonfert, that the town of Clonfert be walled, that Elfin and Clonfert diocese come together and pay for the walling of the town of Clonfert, and that an university be built for the education of priests or that. But all that happened at that stage is the bishop's palace was built, no wall went up, no university was built, Trinity was built 15 or 20 years later, and that was the end of Clonfert. Clonfert went into a decline after that. Now I'll just show you a few interesting things. We have a little bit of time here. Just come up as far as the chancel arch. There's a few interesting motifs here. The great thing about churches and high status churches is the artwork and the symbolic meanings behind some of that artwork. So I want you to look out for some interesting characters here. This is the chancel arch. This is the chancel. And that's the arch. This is 15th century. There's a few characters here that I want you to engage with. First of all, I want you to look at that character there. Anybody here pretty well up on religious art history? No. That's grand. That means I can say what I like. I'm very free to say what I like. That's grand. Now, first of all, that's in medieval art, or in modern art, that's what we refer to as a wyvern. A W-Y-V-E-R-N. A wyvern or a wyvern. It's a dragon. So it's a little dragon, you see him running along there, his little funny little foot, and he just flying across there, just 2 feet, and his tail semi-nodded, and this little wing on his back. Very leathery character, all pock-barked, and you can see the little devil's ears on him. So he's evil. He's a dragon, he's a devil. So he represents evil. But to counteract that, you have another character over here. Do you see the pointed head there? a knight's head. That's a 15th century knight. You can just see it on this side of the rib, looking in towards the altar. You might just see it. He's wearing what we call a bassinet. It's the helmet of that late medieval period. That's good. You have the knight on top, you have the dragon on the bottom. Well, that's as old a theme as you'll get in medieval art. St. Michael slaying the dragon, good over evil. And even in the balance of where they're placed, good will always be on top, evil will always be pushed down. So there's a balance in the art here, on the arch itself. So there's a whole story being told here. That shield there, or that, it is a shield, and it's on the face of the arch there as well. That's the Butlers of Ormond. In other words, Kilkenny and Tipperary. They're an Anglo-Norman family. They were one of the most powerful Anglo-Norman families really in Ireland. But that's their coat of arms, or their shield. Now the big question is, what are the Butlers of Ormond doing here in this territory? They're in Gaelic territory. If it was the de Burgos, you'd accept this, you say, fair enough, or any of the other families that are associated with the region. But the Butlers are here, and we really don't know why, other than the Butlers were great patrons of the church. If you go down through Tipperary and down into Kilkenny, you'll find their coats of arms in churches everywhere. And I suspect, mightn't be proven, I suspect that this was a lady of the Butler household that was doing this. I don't know why I suspect it, but there's more chance of her being intermarried with the families around the place. I don't think it's a male line, because he was here, there'd have to be a history behind it that had to be written in the annals or something. The one thing that's missing is the paintwork. If those banners still had their mottos, we might get John Butler, or whoever it was, had this card or something, or else you just might say, Eke, home or something, behold the man or something like that. It might be a religious thing, but if they were painted, we'd know more, but sadly that's all gone. Now,
So Butler's all, spell the last thing.
Ormond, O-R-M-O-N-D, Ormond. Ormond is Kilkenny, Tipperary, that whole region.
Right.
Ormond. My guttural accent doesn't come across very strong. Sometimes I put on an accent to impress, but I can only keep that up for about 15 minutes, and that's gone, well and truly gone.
Doesn't work.
Now, this is what I want to get to. This is,
Like her.
yeah, well, so do half the people that come here. You can see that she's highly polished. Highly polished. Every bit of her, except her tail. And that's my token polishing there for today.
Oh, from Butler tattoo.
Yeah, but when you look at her, what is she?
Mermaid, is it?
She looks like a mermaid, she feels like a mermaid, and she behaves like a mermaid. So, what is a mermaid though in Christian art? That's the question.
Good question.
Well, some people have suggested that's here in association with St. Brendan, the navigator. That can be an argument. But the fact is that the mermaid is a Christian symbol. You find it on several churches. Clonfert down the road here has a mermaid. And that particular mermaid is external on the doorway and has fish with it. The fish symbolises the Christian soul. A mermaid is half human, half woman, half beast or animal. Lower half is fish, so she has no soul. So she will be placed swimming with fish in order to be able to sort of grapple and try and maybe secure a soul for herself, to save herself. She's trying to be saved by swimming in there with the fish. The fish is missing from here, but what we can now state, can't prove it, is that it's very likely, as part of this greater scheme, that there were fish and the whole water painted here. Because everything here is, you can add other layers to it than that. So we can take it that, first of all, that she's swimming with fish. She's an evil character. She represents 2 of the 7 deadly sins. Despite the fact that she looks quite harmless there, but she's not harmless. The mermaid in classical world, there were harpies, there were sirens, there were half bird, half human, but in Christian art they moved from bird to fish. But the mermaid in Christian art represents 2 of the 7 deadly sins, vanity and lust. Well, you can see she's quite a lusty lady. And she's a temptress. This is what this is all about. She's a temptress. In folklore, she's tempting the sailors to the rock. But the vanity bit is portrayed in this, where she has a comb in one hand and a mirror in the other. So she's a potent symbol. She's an evil character. She's just something that you shouldn't be hanging around with. But what's interesting here is she's almost in the holiest part of the chapel here, the church. What's she doing in here beside the padre? That's the question. Why is she put here? That should be out on the door, or it should be out here on one of the window stops on the bottom of the window. So this one contradicts a lot of them. So she has been moved into the church. Maybe it's just that this was something that was going on at the time. They get the opportunity to, if you like, write this in stone and create the whole story here. But it's only part of a bigger story. There's other carvings here. There's a carved head under that light that we can't see of a female head, probably Our Lady, on the Feast of Our Lady. One of, I don't know, the Assumption or one of the days, indulgences are granted here. There's another head down acting as a corbel or as a support for the arch under the tower. That appears to be John the Baptist. It's showing somebody with their eyes closed. John the Baptist is portrayed as, well, he was different ways of but O'Madden they use around here the whole time.
Yeah.
But that's one of your Madden ancestors. That's a Horden behind you there. And
When did he die?
we go to show you another Madden one here.
1797.
One that we came across here, it's a Daniel Madden, but it just goes to show, you know, a lot of these, you might be looking for your ancestors and these headstones might have fallen over. You know, there could be a lot more headstones here that are completely covered. But we just exposed this one here the other day, and it's,
What day is it on there?
it's a Daniel Madden, and I'm not
Daniel Madden?
Daniel Madden.
You don't have a date?
The date is probably underground, and we can't go digging, unfortunately. But it just,
ornament.
it is, it's lovely, and it's been protected from the sun because it's been face down.
That's
But
good,
it just goes to show, you know, you could be looking for your ancestors and you might be literally stepping over them, and they're there. You know, as I said to the people on my bus, just because you can't find a headstone doesn't mean that they're not there. You know, they really are.